WFC.
Good evening and welcome to the AFU WFC show with me, Matt Crane. Two guests with me tonight. We're chatting Conti Cup Semi-final preview. We're going to talk a bit about the FA's recent announcements, two big announcements sort of this week and a bit of last week as well. We've got the increased FA Cup pay. We've got maternity and sick pay that's now going to become mandatory in contracts. And also there's been some news this evening on the PFA looking to offer membership to championship players as well. So lots to chat about. I've got Rob, who's first time on a Tuesday, Rob, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It feels like it's only been a couple of days since I was last on here. I'll start getting a reputation as being a United fan.
I'm blaming John on that one. No, to be fair, it's good. Enjoy, obviously, listening to you, so it's fantastic. And Gareth, I did promise you, didn't I? The wonderful Gareth, wasn't it? A good intro.
I wonder if you'd remembered that.
Oh, I've not forgot. A little bit of a story behind that, to be fair. We did a teammates, or we're doing a teammate series of FC United. I had conversations, Gareth, and what it was, a lot of people was praising it and said, "Oh, this is great. Who's edited it?" And I thought, well, I can't take credit for that. So I said, yeah. I said, the wonderful Gareth has edited it in his very little spare time. So, yeah, for those wondering, that was the story. Evening to Peter and good evening as well to John. So we'll start off then. Obviously, we'll go straight into it in terms of the maternity cover, sort of a landmark change and sickness as well. This is something that was broken on Friday. And basically what was said was, you know, after a big sort of meeting between the Football Association, there was representatives from the government, people from the PFA and a couple of MPs. They basically said that they're looking to get sick pay and maternity cover in women's football contracts. And basically what happened was, as recently as 2020, this wasn't standard. So this was something where clubs would sort of consult with the PFA, but it was basically up to the clubs. It was at the discretion of the clubs. So since 2020, there's been really big calls to sort of, you know, get this done to support players. Thinking most recently, obviously, Alex Morgan, you know, had a daughter, came back November, brief spell with Tottenham. However, there was issues sort of globally, you know, basic human rights not being met. Players not being given money, not given support. So basically now, finally, they've sort of agreed now to put this into contracts, and they've basically said there'll be fines and sanctions for those clubs that don't comply. So I'll start with yourself, Rob. Obviously, this is pleasing. It's not often on this channel we praise the FA, but I'm going to give them some credit tonight for this. So what are your thoughts on that then, sort of, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll come on to the FA in more detail later. But no, I think it's one of those things where it's basic, you know, just human decency and human right. I mean, if this was happening in any other sort of industry, people would rightly be up in arms about it. And it seems bizarre it's taken this long for it actually to happen, and so much pressure has been required. For one, obviously, we've got to welcome the moves. I will say that I do think that there are WSL clubs, for example, Manchester United, Chelsea, City, etc., that can afford to fund this themselves, and I believe already do. And I think, you know, the money needs to be going down the food chain more and more, in all honesty. Again, it can't just be a money bubble at the top. Obviously, with the big TV rights deal that's come in, I find it very hard to imagine that we can't supplement the costs further down the food chain. And I think that needs to be the next point of pressure, is to ensure this isn't just, you know, a gesture for one league. It becomes a constant thing for all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I noticed as well is that they have extended this to the championship. So it's not just WSL, which in my mind is like fantastic, you know, because at times there does feel like there's this sort of divide, I think's the word, whereas it seems like, right, where it seems like, you know, you've got WSL looked after and it's kind of like the rest of it's just like fend for yourself. And in a way, so it is pleasing. I think, like you said, Rob, as well, you know, if this was any other line of work, there'd be, you know, I'm sure there'd be plenty of discrimination cases being put together. Gareth, your thoughts on it then? Just add to what we've talked about.
the most surprising thing for me was just that this is a new thing, and that this just hasn't been something that's been implemented anyway. I mean, I know primarily I think the issue for this stems from women's football being relatively insecure in terms of contractually, in that we often see 1 year, 18-month deals being made. And I think so a lot of it's going to stem from that. Also, the salary is relatively low. We've had this conversation in the past, but I know of players previously have had to choose between a career and football, and have chosen a career because it's more financially viable. We're starting, thankfully, to see the back of that, and we are starting to see longer term contracts come in. And obviously, with a 1 year contract, it's difficult then for any kind of maternity cover. You'd be unlikely to get anything more than that anything more than statutory in any line of work with that. But like we've said before, I think it's good to see. What we want to see is football being a driving force for change, and this is welcome. And I think it's really important that actually players aren't now having to choose between do they retire and start a family, or are they able to have children and then come back to playing football afterwards. And I think having that option is absolutely what had to happen. And pleased that it is now there, but also surprised that this is something that's being implemented in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking further ahead, because obviously I was reading sort of, the Guardian run a story on it, and they were sort of saying, it's not really gone far enough in terms of the clubs that do offer it. So some clubs where they have offered it have only offered 14 weeks pay, and then things like childcare have been difficult. There was a player in Germany. She basically had to take a child on every away trip to every hotel because it wasn't there. There was no care. There was no help from the staff. There was no help from the club. So I think overall now this should make life better, and it should make people think, because I think at the end of the day, like we touched on, it's a basic human right, and there's not enough sort of support out there. Again, I'm going to link in the second part of the article, and again, I'll let you come in, Rob, on the sickness pay. Again, something that's very rarely thought of in the women's game.
Yeah, no, then again, it should be something that is, I think, just a certainty. I was amazed to see that there was so much of this coming in as legislation. And I was talking to someone who was a lawyer, and they sort of said that from, as you said, from an employment perspective, if you hadn't had these beforehand, and effectively, let's face it, these players do get injured and, do get ill at work, there's so much of a legal minefield. So in a way, I think it's, the FA partly acting to protect their own interest. As, I'm not going to pretend that the FA don't do that, because we all know they do. But at the same time, I think it is vitally important for these players to have those sort of assurances. Again, I remember when Fran Kirby was sort of, significantly ill at Chelsea a couple of years ago, and she's sort of spoken about how the club sort of supported her sort of through that. And I recognise that is the minority of cases. Again, Kirby's very lucky to be a top England international at a top club where, the club were going to bend over backwards to, make sure she recovered and sort of work as long as, someone's just said there, why has it taken the FA this long to bring it in? And I think that, to me, things like this are open more questions than answers as to who exactly in the FA is, making these and suddenly realising these need to happen. It feels a lot of the time, and I've said this again, I'll say it later, women's football a lot of the time feels like a political football at the FA. And a lot of stuff is done purely to, counteract other things they've done, or to use a justification for not doing, certain things. And to me, that's not right, because the interest, if it's there to grow the game, should be absolute and should be continuous, rather than just being, we can do this, but we can't do this.
Yeah, 100%. Gareth, I want to sort of touch on that and sort of use the Frank Kirby thing a little bit, because it's interesting. I sort of recall, and I might be wrong on this, but I seem to recall there was something about injuries, and if it was over a certain time period, it was something to do with contracts that could potentially be cancelled. Now, I don't know on this. It was on somebody injuring their ACL, and they're basically saying clubs don't have a legal obligation to provide any medical care. I think it was after 6 months if they're out for longer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know anything on that, Rob.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember exactly, but I remember the story in question when it came out and said player, I think their contract was up, they got injured, and then they announced that they're not extending it. And yeah, to me, that I thought that was absolutely despicable when I read that story. I appreciate that the finances are squeezed for certain clubs, but I think, you know, you have a duty of care to people, and it's not there, you know, that there should be measures in place, and it shouldn't require them to have to go to, you know, the WPFA or go to whatever, you know, relevant bodies they have to protect themselves. It should be baked in and built in.
Absolutely. Yeah, what I was going to come to you and say was that, Gareth, obviously things like that, especially again thinking sort of outside the WSL, but probably outside the sort of the top half of the table as well. That sort of care is important, isn't it, in terms of sick pay? Because like we've discussed, you know, players shouldn't be having to go to seek advice. Players shouldn't be, you know, it's not through fault of their own that there's, you know, perceived lack of support. And I think with this as well, I noticed the other day, Crystal Palace men have actually started up a program for players that are released. Now, obviously, this is a separate thing to sort of illness and maternity cover, but again, it's sort of general care for players, isn't it? You know, Crystal Palace are checking in with players and providing support and training 3 years after being released. Whether that gets copied over to the women's game is a different debate, but you know, just sort of touch on that and more.
Yeah, I think the issue when you go kind of lower down the leagues is in part-time contracts, and I'm not going to kind of talk about the legalities of employment law because I just don't know. But my assumption would be that there are differences in the law. Well, there evidently are differences in the law between full-time contracts and part-time contracts. And I know that there are also things to do with the length of time you spend at an employer related to what legally that you're entitled to as well. So again, I think the overarching issue is the dependency on really short-term contracts. Signing a player for a year and just 1 year rolling contracts means that they're kind of short-term and you're not making any long-term commitment to a player. So I think that's kind of what we really want to see, is that long-term commitment to a player. You know, we've seen Chelsea, if we use Frank Kirby as the example again, Chelsea were committed to Frank Kirby and helped her kind of through that illness, and then helped her back. And in the sense as well that we saw other clubs, you know, City were really good with Aoife Mannion when she sort of injured her knee. You know, she wasn't able to kind of break back into the first team, but the care was there to kind of help players through. But you know, we do see players kind of get released at the end of contracts when they are injured. You know, Hannah Kane released by Everton after, you know, a really horrible injury. You know, it took a club kind of taking a chance in Leicester, her stepping down to then come back. So, you know, I think it is the issue is primarily with the length of contract, and I can see it from a business sense in that, are you going to continue to pay this asset that's been injured for 8 months and there's no definitive time period on coming back and getting the financial benefit from it? But that's, therein lies the issue, in the sense you're viewing these players as commercial assets and not as people and human beings. And I think that, you know, that's the problem that we're overcoming now, particularly where money is tight. And I think, you know, you could not forgive, but you could kind of set a lesser expectation on clubs like Lewis or London City Lionesses, where they haven't got that multi-million pound backing. You know, even Sunderland to an extent, because Sunderland, you know, in the men's side run poorly.
Yeah.
But for, you know, those WSL clubs, the vast majority of them are, backed by Premier League clubs. All of them backed by Premier League or Championship clubs. So, you know, those clubs are going to be earning, you know, millions of pounds a year, or, you know, plenty to finance health insurance and healthcare for players. And I think it's really good that this thing is starting to come in, and it's just part of the professionalization of the game. It's a game that's been semi-professional for a long period of time. There's going to be a lot of semi-professional sports where funding is limited, but if you want the league to be professional, if you want to be able to package the game as being a professional game, then you need to have professional care for players as well.
Yeah, spot on. It's like Amy says here. Obviously, we had Siobhan Chamberlain. Obviously, during our first WSL season, expecting a child who was given other work to do. I'm just thinking as well. Let me think of the player. It was Sarah Gunnisdottir of Leon, currently expecting a child, and she was sort of saying, she wants to prove to people that she can have a child, come back, and then I think her aim was to go to the Euros in summer. I think that having this and having that support and knowing that things are looked after off the pitch is going to be a massive help. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Rob, just before we sort of move on to the next part.
No, I'd agree with that. I think you hit the nail on the head where you said that people are viewing clubs as commercial assets rather than as human beings. I was talking to some Liverpool fans this morning that were amazed that they didn't just simply stop Neco Williams going on loan yesterday to Fulham after the Carvalho deal fell down. And I had to politely explain to them that, these are people's lives. You're not some sort of pawn that you're, playing a game with. They want to make a career out of it. And I think, in the case of Gunnisdottir, obviously Leon, I'm sure, will be backing her to the hilt and will be putting in, the relevant measures. But what I think really needs to happen is it needs to be a commitment. I would personally say when clubs get promoted to the WSL, considering all the money that we think is going to be in the WSL in the forthcoming, and maybe even in the Championship as well, if the money is going to trickle down, that they have to sign and agree to a code of charter. And that if you want to, go professional and be, professional, which I think, should be the aim, then you should agree to things that, men's clubs would agree to. And it shouldn't be a case. And if owners then, want to challenge that, quite frankly, they aren't fit to run the women's side of the game, and, action needs to be taken.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be fair, we can probably say that for a lot of things. Like, obviously, this is a part that they've acted on, but there's so much more. Speaking of acting on things, I want to move on to the FA Cup. So, obviously, last Wednesday, Natalie ran a show, really, really good show for those that haven't seen it. She had Susie Rack and Rich from the Women's Football Fans Collective, and they were talking about, obviously, equal prize money. Lots of chants and lots of campaigns at the weekend by supporters and supporters groups, and it was brilliant to see. And not long after that, the FA sort of came and said, they're looking to increase prize money as of next season. Now, what they've not done yet is disclosed how much. But I think, again, there's lots of sort of stats and information out there. And I think one thing that sort of shocked me when I was reading more into this was the FA Vase, which is the non-league trophy. The winner for that gets 65,000. Now, you compare that to the winner of the Women's FA Cup, that's 25,000. And that's a 40 grand deficit. Yet the Women's FA Cup final is consistently pulling in 45,000 minimum at a stadium. And then there's so many viewing figures on TV. So there's more of a market there, in my view, anyway, than the men's FA Vase. But yet we're still sort of talking about this disparity in pay. Gareth, thoughts first then on that? And obviously the FA, we don't know the amount, so it's difficult to sort of, jump and praise it too much, because we could be talking 10K, we could be talking 100K. But what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is kind of to make that distinction between, I think to get like 100% equal prize money between the men's FA Cup and women's FA Cup, we're a long way off that. And we're a long way off that being financially viable. What we don't want to do is we want women's football to be profitable. And I think we are a way off having completely equal men's FA Cup, women's FA Cup, for reasons of commercial interest. Emirates are going to be putting in a lot more money into the FA Cup than Vitality are, and that's primarily the problem. What you say there about the FA Vase, that's the key, and I think that's the avenue that we should be pursuing, because the FA Vase is a non-league trophy. It's like the Papa John's Trophy, but for the National League and below. And so In fact, actually, there might be the FA Trophy that's then below, and the FA Vase is even below that. But either way, it's a non-league trophy. So clearly, the commercial attractiveness of that trophy is going to be significantly less than of the Premier knockout competition in the women's game. So I feel like that's really where the FA Vase, FA Trophy, those kind of non-league competitions for now, and it is going to be a journey to get to where we want to be with this. But if anything, really, that makes it profitable to play in this competition, we shouldn't have sides crowdfunding to try and rent coaches or stay overnight for long trips. We should, Ipswich and Southampton, for getting to the fifth round, playing each other. That should, and Ipswich, had a really great run last season's FA Cup as well. That should be able to provide Ipswich with the funding to really be able to push on and make a claim for promotion. Clapton should be able to use the money that they've been awarded for reaching the first round proper to be able to push on and get promotion. They're a seventh tier club. That should absolutely revolutionise their season and the way that they approach next season. And at the moment, that's not what's happening. So, absolutely. Prize money should be increased, and it should be increased to be in line at least with the FA Vase. Hopefully soon within line with the FA Trophy. And I think it is really important that when we're pushing for this increase in prize money, that we're not saying it should be the exact same as the men's FA Cup, because I just don't think that we're going to see millions and millions of pounds being given to the winners of the women's FA Cup. What is it for the men? 1.8 million. I just can't see there being that much money coming into it. And I think it's really careful that what we don't do is put women's football as being unattractive to investors, because that investment, that sponsorship, Barclays, Vitality, at the moment are really key in growing the game. What we don't want to do is sort of show potential sponsors that actually going to have to invest an awful lot more in order to kind of get anything back, because I just feel they just won't do it. It's a fine line, but absolutely FA Vase, FA Trophy, that should be in line with those competitions.
Yeah. Rob, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, because I'm going to slightly disagree, I think, with Gareth here, in that I think that if you're talking about these big companies that want to sponsor the Premier competitions, let's face it, when the FA Cup sponsorship comes up, there's always a bidding, right? There's always a big battle. I remember various companies in my lifetime have been, FA Cup sponsors, and to be honest, I'm a bit of a purist, and that I think I don't like there being a sponsor on tournaments. I'd rather it be just the FA Cup, and that's always what it's going to be to me. In terms of the women's game, I think it's possible, and it's able to get that level of sponsorship, and I think that's where we now need to be pushing towards, is getting a sponsor in that's willing to put that money in, because I think from a PR perspective, it's an absolute no-brainer for a company if they come in and say we want to level up the prize money. A, it's a no-brainer, and B, it also means any other subsequent company that's going to come in for it has to say, well, we can't drop it down again, so we've got to level it up and keep it there. I appreciate with what's being sort of said about the FA Vase and the FA Trophy, and I've been to finals of both of them. I think they're fantastic, and I think it's important to note, for these players, this might be their only ever chance they get to play at Wembley. It's a big day for them and their family, for their clubs. Winning silverware at any level is, a big, big thing. But for the women's FA Cup final, the names and the players that you can get in these finals, as someone says, women, PFA should cover that at the minimum. Yeah, don't disagree. But looking back at the final, Chelsea, when they played against Arsenal in that December final, you had arguably England's best player, Fran Kirby, assisting, Australian superstar and third place in the Ballon d'Or, Sam Kerr. And, you had a team of world-class internationals on either side. It's not as if this was a situation, again, if there'd been a situation where, this was maybe 30 years ago, and not even 30, maybe 10, 20 years ago, when you're talking about there being, full semi-professional clubs, I could understand this debate and this caution. But I think now when you've got these world-class players, it's kind of insulting. And I say the same in the Champions League as well. Not necessarily to the same extent, but I think Champions League prize money, considering that they want to try and advertise it as an equal game and want to try and level it up, the situation has to be, not tiptoeing around it. It needs to be pushing for that equality. And I think, it'd be interesting to see what new funds and what new numbers do come out of this next round of it, because I think now you've started this wave of pushing for, better sponsorship, better money, and I think that comes on to the next point that I'll sort of start discussing. It's now a point where you have to say we need to start bringing them together. Now, coming on to sort of that next point, I appreciate that the Women's FA Cup, I'm not going to pretend it's at the same stage as the Men's FA Cup. The Men's FA Cup is a footballing institution. It is a trophy that, everywhere around the world, when that final comes around, every single country will be broadcasting it, whoever is in that final. You will have people who aren't even that interested in football putting on, the FA Cup final. I talked to my dad, who sort of was in the 70s and 80s, who remembers the days of the whole days of FA Cup coverage when it would start at, 8:30 and would be going on till sort of 9 o'clock at night, and the whole day would be the FA Cup day. It's the day you mark in the calendar. I'm not pretending the women's game has got there yet, but one thing I will say is it's despicable how much, or how little rather, of the content is actually available. There were, I think, sort of 16 ties last weekend. I think 3 of them were easily ready and available. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I expect clubs to, at certain levels down the food chain to televise it. I'm not going to pretend, that they have the facilities for it. But the FA have the FA player. The FA player is designed to be able to show women's football at all levels and at all matches. I find it very, very hard. Someone says the FA Cup, the FA is a not-for-profit. Even still, the sponsors, I refuse to believe the sponsors can't come in and put the money where their mouth is, especially if they want to, be associated with it. I don't know, was the game against Bridgewater, was that available anywhere?
No, it's on radio, wasn't it, I think, Gareth?
Yeah, so it was on BBC Radio Somerset. The reason it wasn't available from a video perspective is that Bridgewater's ground didn't have the capacity to be able to film.
Okay, that's valid enough. And if it's situations like that, that's totally fine. Again, I think Chelsea-Aston Villa was sort of televised. Arsenal's game against London City Lionesses, I think, was televised or was possibly on the radio. None of the other ties, to my knowledge, were televised. Now, you can't tell me Southampton played at the St Mary's for crying out loud. You can't tell me they couldn't have got a camera crew in there. And you can't tell me you couldn't have got a TV station to pick this up and say, we'll broadcast it. Or someone to pick it up and broadcast it. The fact that we've got this next round of ties coming, where I think one of them's being broadcast. I think maybe there's rumours that your game against City has been picked for the 12 o'clock slot. Someone says it's now on the FA player several days later. That's what I don't understand, is that they're able to get the footage and stuff, so they must be able to get it at the time, but they weren't able to broadcast it. And this is the same with the Southampton game. Why couldn't you broadcast it in some way, shape or form? At the same time, you've also got the ludicrous situation where the FA have decided to put the Chelsea match against Leicester and the Liverpool match against Arsenal at the same time on the Sunday, about an hour before the Carabao Cup final. Now, I was really looking forward to going down to that game against Leicester. I went to the game against Leicester early in the season. I know, again, Jack from Leicester Fan TV. I know good mates who are Leicester fans. Looking forward to going to that. Love a good cup game, me. But I also bought tickets for the Carabao Cup final. And I'm now in a situation where I've now got to choose between, do I go and watch the women or the men? And I refuse to believe the FA couldn't have looked at this and said, hang on, maybe we'll move this tie to the Saturday. And I know Liverpool Women's Supporters Group have said to me, they're thinking, London City was shown on the BBC Red Button, so it wasn't even that accessible. I refuse to believe that with the way we want to grow this game, we can't get these games on and available and ready to be shown. I mean, just out of interest, Gareth, when do you last remember a weekend of football when the men's FA Cup there wasn't at least one game easily available?
Oh, at all? I don't remember it.
Exactly. And again, when do you last remember when you saw a women's FA Cup weekend where you could watch more than one game?
Yeah, doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, not like on TV without the red button. Yeah,
exactly. And that's my the millions from the last 8 and feed that back into the to be honest, I wouldn't be.
The thing is, though, with that comment that John just made, it just isn't true, because there's going to be clubs that, the thing with the FA Cup from the men's side is that there is potential for every single club, give or take a couple that have formed recently, in theory, have a chance of getting to that competition. We've seen teams like Bradford, when they're in League One, League Two, get into that stage, and then that money, they will miss it. It's not a given that the last 8 are going to be 8 Premier League teams, because really the difference between a couple 100,000 for them probably isn't enormous. But yeah, I just think it would make a massive difference, and I think it should be the further you get, the more money you get. And I think with sponsors, we are going to see sponsors starting to pay more money. But I just think we are a while off, 5 years or so off any company going, okay, we're going to pay £10 million a year for the Women's FA Cup. I just don't think it's going to be commercially viable. And, obviously I would absolutely love for a business to go, it doesn't matter. We're going to make a loss on this and we'll pay £10 million a year. And it doesn't matter that we're going to make a loss because we've got the capital to be able to do that. I just can't see it happening. As much as I would love, unless what the FA do, like, I think you kind of mentioned it, is they package the FA Cup together. And then once, if they sell the FA Cup and both FA Cups as one package, then what Emirates would be doing, for example, with that £10 million per year, they've just signed an extension. It would be easy then to go, okay, well, you're paying for 2 competitions, so we're going to split that money, 5 million to the men's prize pot, 5 million to the women's prize pot. I think that's the only way that we're going to, within the next 5 years or so, see a properly equal prize money, is if they are packaged together as one asset. And then, like you say, then we'll start to see, hopefully, an increase in it being televised, because it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous that you have to try and find the side that's top of the league behind the BBC red button. It especially when players like Huddersfield played at John Smith's, like you say, Southampton played at St Mary's. Did Forest play at the City?
Yeah, Forest at the City. Yeah, Forest at the City ground.
So we're seeing clubs now using the FA Cup as a platform to be able to kind of get an increase in support. Newcastle played at Newcastle Falcons against Ipswich, which will also be set up for TV, because if they're not in the Rugby Premiership at the moment, they have been recently. I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, no, I think absolutely you're spot on. The fact that it's not televised as much as it possibly could be, or absolutely should be. If you've made a deal with Sky to have games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday across Sky and the BBC, so use those fixtures that you've kind of packaged together. It is pretty shocking that it isn't. You could easily have one game on a Friday, one game on a Saturday, one game on a Sunday as a bare minimum.
And I think for me, it's also and again, I'm going to sound like an absolute FA Cup sort of romanticist here, but to me, I think there is an aspect of it of like especially in the third round. I love the third round. That's probably my favourite weekend of the footballing calendar, because you come into it as a big Premier League side. And again, Chelsea obviously got to play Chesterfield in the third round this time around. I think that's absolutely wonderful. For Chelsea fans to see what life is like at other clubs, and to see what life is like, especially when you get an away tie. And for those clubs, it can be genuinely transformative. And I was just thinking, Bridgewater, for example. Bridgewater will have made an absolute, killing, and rightly so. Congratulations to them for getting through to that stage and getting to play Manchester United. Manchester United they took it seriously. They played a strong side. Okay, I do think you had some youngsters on the bench, but you went and got the tie won, and, you paid the respect to it. As someone's, I don't disagree with that as well. But that's what I think is really lacking, is those stories and those narratives. Like, I didn't see an awful lot, especially on the BBC website, where I thought they would really be pushing it, about the Manchester United Bridgewater tie. And to me, that was something that, that's one of the wrong things, because if that had been, the men's game, for example, I remember last year when I can't remember, was it Tottenham played someone in the 8th tier of English football, and you had pretty much a week-long commentary. I think on the BBC website at the moment we've got a week-long. Russell Penn is doing a week-long column up to Kidderminster Harry is playing against West Ham this weekend. There's not that same level of treatment, and that to me is what frustrates me, because I don't think the Women's FA Cup is ever going to get that same stature as the Men's FA Cup in general, because I think the Men's FA Cup has been there for 150 years now, and ultimately that's, a time thing. But I also don't think it's helped, because you don't, the support isn't there, and the support is only there when the FA want it to be there. And that is what really frustrates me about a lot of things in women's football, is that the support is there if the fans push for it, or if the FA realise they need to bring it out. It's not them, going off their own accord.
Yeah, I think what's frustrating for me, because I'm reading and I'm agreeing obviously with what John's put here about, the duty of the FA. I think what annoys me is, like you were saying there, Rob, about like, you hear about the men's side for a week long, and I think back to like times when on, Football Focus they'd send Dion Dublin or Clem, and they'd go like behind the scenes. I think I remember it at Cambridge United when Man United played them a few years back. They done one. We played Exeter City, talking probably about 8, 9, 10 years ago now at St James's Park. And I think if you want these companies to come on board and invest, for me, they're going to obviously want something back for the money. So that's marketing, which needs to be improved. Like John says, the FA investing, the FA marketing as well. We talked about avoiding fixture clashes. That for me is a big one. I know, I think it was Liverpool have requested to change it, and I think they're waiting for Arsenal.
Yeah, Liverpool have, and the Chelsea supporters group have now also requested it with the club. And we've now been told that it's the FA's decision rather than the club's decision, and the club asked for it to be on the Saturday anyway. So
yeah, I think the thing is, for me, if both clubs agree, then it shouldn't be down to the FA to say yes or no. It should just be a given. If both clubs are agreeing to
that would be far too much common sense being deployed there. Can't have that.
But I think going forward, I just think, Gareth, you mentioned Ipswich and Newcastle before, and I read comments from the Ipswich manager, and he was saying, absolute credit to the 20 or 30 fans that made the absolute trek up there. And I think, well, that's going to have cost the fans a lot. So what on earth's it cost his team? They've got a coach trip. They've got everybody to stay overnight. They've got to then get back as well. All that, and you get, I think it was £500. Well, obviously not Ipswich because they won, but Newcastle get £500. Ipswich won't have got too much more. We're talking prize money. I think the 4th round of the Men's FA Cup, which is the final qualifying round before the first round proper, the winners of that get just short of 9,500. Now, I'm not saying, like we sort of talked about, it's not going to make exactly equal, but imagine even what half of that could do for like a Clapton or, a Stourbridge or somebody in those lower sort of reaches of the women's pyramid. And I just think it's time now that things are just improved for the good of the game. We can't have clubs spending 10,000 on travel and accommodation to get £500. It's not financially there. And I think, this is why people are rightly so asking these questions. And I think, it's great that what the Women's Fans Collective has done, I think they got a Coventry MP on board, and I think there's one from Sunderland. And these conversations are happening. Now, obviously, we're still a million miles away, and there's still a lot more we can do. But I think for me, getting the ball rolling, especially on the clashes, because it's like you said, Rob, you shouldn't have to choose cup final or, your women's side. It should just be cup final Sunday, women are Saturday. I'm even thinking back, and I'm thinking back to conversations and comments as well, people talking about getting things on TV. Leeds United, the women's side's in Tier 4. They put their league game on YouTube the other day. It's up to 7,000 views. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen across the board, but it just shows that actually, if there's a way you can do something and it's possible, do it. Burnley stream games on TikTok. And I just think this is why I link it into marketing for me, because yes, camera equipment costs and clubs are going to need that, or even to rent it if they don't have it. But it's like, with that investment from companies coming on board, or like you said, Gareth, a joint sponsorship from Emirates, saying we'll pick up both or whoever, things like that. And I think it's just asking those questions, but fully with John. If the FA put the feelers out and they look to attract sponsors, there's no reason for me why they can't turn around and say, listen, we'll make sure clubs market it correctly. We'll do it ourselves. We'll increase it. We want you to invest 5 million or whatever. And go at it that way, I think. Is there any final points from either of you before we sort of look at a cup preview that you want to add?
Just in terms of what you said there about sponsorship, the final thing I'd say is that it doesn't even, I think, need necessarily the clubs spearheading it. We know there are groups like, again, All for United, the CSW Social, Her Game Too, the Women's Football Collective, that if you went to any of us, let's face it, if they went to any of us and said, do you want to partner with, your club and the FA to promote the Women's FA Cup? You won't get any finance out of it, but you'll get publicity out of it. Let's face it, we'd all jump at it because we all love the club and we want it to grow. I refuse to believe there isn't this situation for tens, if not hundreds, of women's clubs. So it wouldn't even necessarily be a financial, that much of a burden. I know we create amazing content around it anyway. I will give Chelsea some credit here, and that Chelsea are very good at making everyone aware and accessible. They have a post on social media of, how you can watch it and when you can watch, games, etc. And they do make it available through the app. But I think if you're going to, again, it comes back to that point about the code of charter. To me, that would be one of the things in this code of charter that I'm sort of imagining, is that you commit to making sure that games are available whenever and wherever possible, because there are so many mediums you can now stream it on. Again, we talked about, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, etc. It's no longer a case that you need a proper TV gantry. And I'm sure people would maybe forgive slightly lower quality, streaming or sort of mobile phone stream if it meant they got to watch the team they loved and the club they loved.
Yeah, absolutely. Do either of you want to take this question and then?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's pros and cons for that. The financial one for the sort of tier 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clubs is massive. The downside I can see is the flip side is then you're then asking the fans of WSL clubs to travel. So whilst there'll be a massive benefit financially for those teams in a lower league, the inconvenience is shifted onto the fans, which we say on other shows that the FA and the football clubs don't think about the fans. So yeah, I feel that's a balancing act of, it financially it's great for those clubs, but then it's also financially really inconvenient for fans.
Yeah. It's similar to a conversation actually that me and Rob had when we were sort of messaging earlier this afternoon, and we were I was sort of saying, you don't want games on TV when nobody's there. And we were talking about sort of, we go to Arsenal this Saturday, it's 12:30. I think you said, didn't you, that Chelsea have Man City, and that's 12:30.
Sunday, 12:30.
Yeah, we had Arsenal, I think back in November up at our place, and that was at 12 o'clock. And you think, it's like you say, you've got to get it right. You've got to get that balance, because yes, we all want increased sponsorships and TV, but you also don't want to put match going fans, away from going and then having a stand that looks bare because nobody can get there or it's not realistic, things like that. So I can see what's being said in that point. I get it, because obviously it's low travel costs. The only thing I would say is you relying also, like you said, on fans, Gareth, you're relying on people turning up. Just because they would be at home doesn't necessarily mean that, they're going to turn up. And I think another thing, if you've got a ground like a Bridgewater, and it was great they were at home, 2,500, if there was some agreement like the men's where some of the away teams get a proportion of the gate receipts, surely 2,000 or 3,000 at Chelsea or at Man United or at Arsenal, if there was that split on gate receipts, would be far more beneficial than playing away, basically. Again, it's just ideas, really. Let's have a look what we've got here. Government subsidiaries would go a long way. I don't talk about the government, but
no, I don't want the government at the moment anywhere near the women's game.
Yeah, I mean, I can see kind of what's being thought about, but yeah, you don't want them interfering. Yeah, we'll leave that one there. The less said, the better. I want to briefly, I know we said we're going to Chelsea. I want to very briefly just talk, and I did mention I'd do it before. The PFA released a statement, and this was talking about the PFA extending their membership to championship players. Obviously, we've talked about this a lot, Gareth, haven't we? Both with players, with coaches, with guests as well. This obviously came to light a lot more during the Coventry United situation. And I think, who was it now? I think it was Tom Gary said that 5 Coventry players were covered, and that was only because they played WSL. I'll stick with you, Gareth, and then you can come in as well, Rob. About time, I'm going to say, just to, sort of keep players protected. Again, it shouldn't have situations like Coventry to happen until we think, right, let's take action. But yeah, do you want to go on that subject.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a huge amount to add. Like, I understand the logic behind why they weren't covered. I don't agree with it, but it's the Professional Footballers Association, and they weren't professional footballers, so it makes sense. But it should just be semantics, and it should just be, that if you are a footballer in a league that the way you could theoretically be a professional footballer. I'm not saying that clubs in tier 4 should be covered by the PFA, but absolutely the championship, when it rebranded as the FA Women's Championship, it should have been treated as a second tier. It's like any union really. You look at teachers unions, look at the NEU, and you don't just have to be a member of the teaching staff to be part of it. Even when it was NUT, National Union of Teachers, it wasn't just teachers that were in there. I think unions in general, whether that's the PFA, the NEU, or Unison, which is a massive union, they're stronger the more people that are in them. So it's within the best interest of a union to include more people within that union, so then you have better collective bargaining power. And it's just kind of like simple from like an economic and theoretical perspective, that the more people that are in a group, the more power that group has. So yeah, I think absolutely it's fantastic that they're included. It is about time, and it should have happened in 2018 when the rebrand of the championship happened.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add, Rob?
No, I completely agree on the semantics point of view. Far too often it's, people are more interested in sort of the wringing of hands and the fact we can't do anything rather than actually helping people. Yeah,
absolutely. So fingers crossed again that comes in for the better. Final part of the show then, obviously, tomorrow's Conti Cup clash. Again, obviously, whilst we've been talking accessibility, that got announced last week that it would be on the red button as well. Obviously, it's another competition that it drives me up the wall in terms of accessibility. But I'm not going to go off on a mad one. They allowed the FA player, and then they upped it and said, "Oh, actually, it's going to be on the red button." And I think Man City's on the red button on Thursday as well. So that's pleasing to start off with. Rob, then from a Chelsea perspective, obviously, I mean, your month looks sort of fixture-wise as heavy as ours. Obviously, we meet tomorrow. You have Man City at the weekend, and then you have Arsenal. And we've sort of got Man City in there twice due to the FA Cup, and then obviously yourselves and Arsenal away. What are you thinking from a Chelsea point of view then? Because obviously you've got, I'm assuming Sam Kerr's back because Australia got knocked out. So that's going to be interesting for me, whether she starts, she's benched. But what are you expecting tomorrow then? Sort of maybe team news or something like that?
I mean, firstly, I'll say it's always impossible to predict what Emma Hayes is going to do, because Emma Hayes is the sort of manager who will give you a team sheet the night before, and then on the day there'll be 3 changes. She likes a good mind game. She's one of the best in the business. It's an interesting one, I think. Again, from a couple of sort of perspectives. Number one, I think Chelsea will be happy the tie is at home, because I think as we said about atmosphere and grounds, Kingsmeadow does get a vociferous atmosphere. I know United are going to bring a good away following as well. So hopefully, we really should see that. I think away fans more need to be part of the blueprint of the WSL rather than making it touchy-feely, family-friendly. It can still be that with away fans. It's a big game, I think, from a United perspective, because obviously being that close now to a cup final, and I've said a bit of silverware goes a long way in a squad, whereas in Chelsea's squad, you've got players that have been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I think it's also a big one to set up for the rest of the month, because I think, a good result tomorrow, obviously getting you into a cup final, is the sort of great, feel-good factor to push you forward ahead of, tough games. Again, I think you said you got Arsenal. Is it this weekend?
Yeah, Arsenal Saturday.
Arsenal on Saturday, and Chelsea, of course, play City on Sunday. So, realistically, that is both of those are title sort of deciding matches. I think by the end of this month, and I've said this a couple of times, all of the various positions in the WSL, I think you'll be able to confidently predict who will win it, who will be in the Champions League spots by the end of the month. Because even though there will be other games, I think it's the things that come out of these matches will be sort of focused. For Chelsea, it'll be Zakira Musovic. Musovic has played all of our Conti Cup games. Again, Musovic has played very, very well, actually, in the Conti Cup. She's unlucky in the fact she's got Anne-Catherine Berger in front of her, who, over the last 12 months has arguably been the best goalkeeper worldwide. But Musovic hasn't really let them down. If I was to have a guess at the Chelsea lineup, it would be Musovic in goal, Aniak Noon, Jess Carter, and Millie Bright as the back three, with Carter on the right-hand side, Millie Bright in the centre, and Noon on the left. Right wing back, most likely going to be Erin Cuthbert. She's sort of played in that position at various times this season, has also been used in central midfield, but I think she'll be right wing back. Left wing back, most likely Jonna Anderson, although Chelsea could go with Gura Wrighton. They've gone with Wrighton in certain games when she's been they've been looking to sort of squeeze and off the press, but I think Chelsea will go with the more defensive Jonna Anderson. The midfield, I believe Melanie Leupolz is still out, so you're probably looking at Sophie Ingle alongside maybe Jessie Fleming, or possibly sort of seeing Drew Spence in there for the solidity. I think it's more likely to be Ingle and Fleming, because Fleming will offer the passing forward. Then for the front three, you'd imagine it's going to be Pernilla Harder, Fran Kirby, and then Sam Kerr if she's fit, or if not, Beth England if she's recovered from her knock. I believe Lauren James currently has an unspecified illness. No one's quite sure what it is, so she's likely to be on the bench if featuring at all. Magda Eriksson is out injured. That was announced. Melanie Leupolz has been coming back from long COVID. Mary Mielder's still injured. So I think, Chelsea's lineup is pretty set, and there's not much depth, despite the fact that everyone tells us we have, a zillion players for every position. There's actually not a lot of depth sort of tomorrow, but I think it's more a case that Chelsea will look at the lineup and will feel that the lineup they put out should be able to win these games, on the basis they'll have players coming back later in the month to sort of solidify it for the other matches.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just add this whilst Pete's asking me directly, and then I'll come to you, Gareth. Who should start? I mean, to be fair, I fully expected Sophie Baggerley against Bridgewater, and she didn't get it. Now, Sophie's obviously been our cup keeper, so for me, I think it would be harsh to change keepers personally.
Very good keeper.
Yeah.
Very good, very, very underrated keeper, Sophie Baggerley.
We've said this a lot on this channel, that she's pushed Mary Earps on leaps and bounds since coming in, because she's had that quality competition, whereas Rambo and Fran Bentley haven't quite lived up to the standard, even though people give them the hype, if that makes sense. But yeah, Gareth, obviously from a Man United point of view, and you can give your goalkeeper as well, I hate to refer back to that game because it was just a disaster. Rob's smiling there, he knows what's coming. But have we learned from it, and what you're expecting tomorrow? And who do you think will start in goal? I'm going to pass that question as well.
Okay, so I'm going to start by saying that I think Sophie Baggerley should start in goal as well. I really don't like it when you have a goalkeeper get you to a certain point in a competition and then you go, actually, no, we're going to leave it. It annoyed me when United men dropped Sergio Romero for the final and played De Gea in goal. I found that irritating as well. In terms of like what are we thinking with regards to the last game, I'm just going to actually I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to let someone else answer the question because Aoife Mannion is currently doing a Q&A on the way down to, or was doing Q&A on the way down to the game. So, someone asked her, what do you think about the earlier result versus Chelsea, or do you see yourselves as a different team now? And she just said, our performance was poor that day. That's the beauty of football. There's always the next game. And I think that's the attitude the team have got to have forget it. Like, it doesn't matter. It was months ago. The team is different then. That was, one of the first few games of the season, getting new ideas into the team, new coach, new players, new style of play, players coming back from injury, all that kind of stuff. So I think it is a different kind of kettle of fish now. I think Chelsea have had some results in the last few weeks that have been relatively disappointing. The Brighton game is one that kind of comes to mind pretty quickly. And United are in really, really good form. So, I think Chelsea maybe being I don't want to say out of form. I think that'd be a little bit harsh, but Chelsea having a disappointing result or two recently and momentum being firmly in our sails means I think it's a really 50-50 game. And I could see kind of anybody winning it. I think it's going to be cagey. It's going to be a typical semi-final. I don't think both teams are going to go completely all out. I think it will be the first half, particularly quite cagey. I think it'll be a 1-0, 2-1 kind of game. Wouldn't be surprised if it ends up kind of being a draw after 90 minutes. I think in terms of how United are going to line up, we'll probably go pretty similar to how we have been recently. I think maybe Sophie Bagley in goal. Probably see fullbacks of Ona and Hannah Blundell. Probably Thorisdottir and Mannion at centre half. I don't think we'll see any of the new signings start. Then probably central midfield. Ladd, Katie, and probably. I think it depends. It could Vilda maybe as well. Bo Rees are in there, and then maybe I don't know. Leslie, Tooney, Leah potentially, but then what's going on the right hand side? I genuinely don't know kind of how it's going to go. It depends kind of what we want to do. Do we want to go in there and just be difficult to break down and awkward and secure? Or do we want to go and try and outscore Chelsea because we know what Chelsea can do offensively? I would probably be a bit more conservative and maybe play, definitely play Hayley Ladd, probably play Katie and Bo Rees as well. But then you're potentially leaving out Tooney, which I don't think is going to be the best option. So, yeah, I think whatever he goes with in midfield is going to be the right option. I think he probably played players last weekend as a means of keeping momentum and keeping them going and keeping the kind of wind in the sails. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a good game. I'm glad it's on the red button. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. I think it's the right platform for it as well, because anybody can watch it. Like, it could be on Sky. It could be on the FA Player as well. But again, you need to create an account for that. Whereas everybody can pick up their remote and just press that red button and it can be there. So, no, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a close game. I think it's going to really come down to if Ladd's suspended, then that's kind of just meant that the last 2 minutes I've been talking has been complete nonsense. That's not unusual.
I didn't think she was suspended.
I have no idea. But if she is, we need someone to go into that midfield and sit and hold and break up attack. I don't want to see what happened last time where we allowed Chelsea to kind of have freedom. I want players to get stuck in. I want players to, not be afraid to make a tough challenge. I feel like Chelsea are a really good side, and we might need to sort of knuckle down and be a bit physical and kind of make it awkward for Chelsea to play, and then get forward quickly and sort of quick. But I don't want people to dawdle on the ball. So if we dawdle on the ball, we'll kind of make mistakes again. So I'm pretty confident as I've ever been playing Chelsea. I feel like this is the best chance we've had to get something. I've felt times previously where if we get a draw, it's probably a good result. Whereas this, I feel like we've got a real opportunity. We've never reached a cup final. We've never we've just never done it. So let's go and make the first one. Yeah, Jackie is a more kind of creative, more attacking player, I think, than Ladd. And I think against these top sides like Chelsea and whoever if we get to the final, whoever we play in the final, we'd need to have someone holding. Rob's mentioned in the private chat this dangerous being confident going to Kings Meadow. I just want to say I'm not confident that we're going to go there and win the game. I'm saying that it's like the most confident I've felt ever playing Chelsea that we can get something. If we get to 90 minutes and it's 1-1, hey, we've got a chance of getting to a final. But we just need to be solid. We need to be solid defensively at the back, and we have been recently. We've been difficult to break down, and our defenders have done that job. So if we can keep that up, then we've got the chance of getting a result.
I think for me, the final sort of two things I'll sort of mention that I think are the real interesting points for me are, number one, are you going to try and play out from the back again against us? And this is why I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Martha Thomas start up front if she's fit, to give a presence and a focal point up there. I know she'll be up against three defenders, but if you have the other two attackers pushing on, you can potentially cause an overload. But it means that when you had the away game, I think you had Toon playing as the false nine in the first half. And, every time the ball was just being played forward, Millie Bright is about, twice her height, was just sort of, getting up and just nodding it straight away. And, if you try and play out from the back against Chelsea, as you will no doubt remember, and as other teams have found out this year, it turns out Pernilla Harder and Fran Kirby are quite good at pressing you on the ball. The other one, I think, is also how you handle Pernilla Harder, because I think that's been the Chelsea's real ace in the last two times we've played you, has been the fact that Pernilla Harder is the sort of player that can just pick the ball up and just, you suddenly there's no danger and suddenly she's gone past three players and lofted it into the net. And I think it's that little bit of X factor that she has. I also do think she probably raises her game a little bit playing against United because she is a United fan. And she wants to, I think, to her, the games are special. I'm not going to pretend that I don't think they are. But I think she's also going to have a bit of something to prove, especially if Sam Kerr's just come back, because Harder's been playing through the middle in the last couple of weeks and been playing relatively well through the middle. Now Sam Kerr has come back, you'd expect her to sort of slot straight back in. And I think Harder will have that, enthusiasm and interest to say, look at me, I can still, be the leading sort of player, even though Sam Kerr is back, because we know how good Sam Kerr is up front.
Can I just...
Oh, yeah, go on, Gareth.
Yeah, can I just address those couple of things in the chat? The first one coming from Norman. What about Kirsty Smith? I like Kirsty Smith. I think she's a good player. I think for this game, though, I'd just prefer Hannah. And then Eldon saying he'd rather have Jackie over Zellum because she's prone to mistakes. Ordinarily, I would agree. However, given the last month or so, given that Jackie is still coming back from an injury and probably is still having her minutes managed, and the fact that we're seeing this is probably the best run of form that Katie Zellum has ever had in a United shirt, and she's got something in 7 appearances before Bridgewater, 3 goals and 4 assists, and I think that I would just kind of rather continue to keep that rich vein of form going.
Yeah, it's interesting. because I was going to sort of touch on that form, and obviously, like Rob was saying about not underestimating Kingsmeadow, but I just wonder, obviously, it is 7 games, won, 7 clean sheets. Yes, there's some questionable sides in there, like the Birminghams, the Bridgewaters, I get that. But I just wonder how much confidence they will take from the Arsenal win, because that wasn't our strongest team. And I do wonder, I think there was a stat, I think it was Asif that put it out, and it was something like the first time since 2016 that Arsenal hadn't scored at home in a game, if I remember correctly. I just wonder that, with a team that wasn't our best, but was still quite strong, could we go there and maybe that swing it? That said, it's still a difficult game. Arsenal, for me, they've massively struggled since probably about December, or as I said the other week, I feel like they've been found out. This is a different proposition. Obviously, we've sort of discussed that and analysed it. It is going to be close, so I'm going to come to score predictions, and I'll start by saying I think there was a lot of 2-1s mentioned. I'm thinking 1-1, and I'm going to be nicking a goal in extra time. I don't fancy a shootout, just because I've seen our penalties against Leicester, and I wanted to cry. I think I'm going to go 1-1, and then I'm gonna have to say nick it in extra time. Gareth, do you want to go next, and then we'll finish with Rob, and then wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to agree with the 1-1. Is there extra time?
Copy it.
Is there extra
time? I think, won't it? And then to penalties, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if it does, then I fancy someone to get a winner. If it goes to penalties, then it's anyone's game. But I think after 90 minutes, it'll be 1-1. I think it'll be a really cagey game. Both sides kind of a little bit scared to make a mistake. And we'll see just a couple of pieces of real quality to score goals.
Yeah. Rob?
I think it'll probably be 1-0. I don't think either side will want extra time. And I think that's why teams, I could see, it being a late goal due to maybe a mistake or something as one of the sides push for it, because I don't think with the fixtures that we have at the weekend, either side will want extra time. Being completely honest, this is probably, I would say, priority number 3 on Chelsea's list, behind the FA Cup and most importantly the WSL. For Manchester United, obviously, I think it's probably fair to say it is probably of more importance, because I think you would say Chelsea are in more of a sort of affirmative position in the title race at this moment in time. However, I do certainly think United have a chance to come and sort of do it. I just think I could just see it being one of those very classic Emma Hayes 1-0s where Chelsea get a goal and then just sort of stifle all of the life out of it. And it's a horrendous watch for a neutral, but Emma Hayes is very good at going Mourinho, as we like to call it. And I could very much see it being something like that, a Millie Bright goal from a set piece, or a piece of magic from Pernilla Hardage that absolutely nothing deciding it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot closer anyway than the league result. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, I will say that was an anomaly. The fun thing I will say is I really hope the referee tomorrow isn't what we end up discussing, because I don't want it to be a case of discussing a biased referee. I just want one that knows the rules and knows what they're doing, because I want to watch a decent game of football, not the referee.
No, spot on. John's asking, is there extra time? And then Pete says no. The only reason why I mentioned that was I remember watching the Arsenal game. And again, this could be poor commentary or punditry, but it was mentioned about extra time in that round. So I did assume. If not, I'm still going 2-1 anyway. So can't answer your question on extra time. And like you say, just hope for a good game, something like you say, in terms of refereeing and that. I do think, though, whoever wins will lift the trophy. I just can't see either of the two teams in the other semi-final really having, I don't know what's the word, a say in it or a chance really. I think, you've got too much for City. We
translated, you really don't want City to win it is what I'm hearing right now.
We all want Tottenham in the final.
The potentially really irritating thing about if we get to the final, the chances are that our February will be Chelsea, Arsenal, City in the league, City in the FA Cup, then City in the Conti Cup final.
Listen, you've got to beat the best to lift trophies. Yeah. Mark Skinner said that. You've got to beat the best. So, yeah, we take what we've been given out. I'm sure we all love a good chat, and I'm sure I've read some great comments about how the FA Cup draw is rigged, but that's the cards we've been dealt. So, nothing more to add to that. Paul asking, is the match televised? It is indeed, Paul. It's on Red Button. So we've got that luxury of not having the FA play a break on you or listening to some weird and wonderful commentary. Come to the end of the show. So thank you very much, Rob, for joining us and providing insight tonight. Gareth, the wonderful Gareth, will sign off as well. Thank you to you. Tomorrow, obviously, then, big game. There'll be a few of our people down there providing a little bit of content, some images, some videos if we can. So, yeah, that'll be that. So keep an eye out for that. And then Johnny's back Thursday. He's got Reese Land with him, I believe, and Natalie as well. So look out for that one. And we'll see you all soon. Thanks very much.